How do you measure a life poured into walls? I stood in my kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, the same recipe Elijah loved, the one I'd made every Sunday for decades, when Damon dropped his words like a stone through glass. Mom, maybe it's time you found your own place. My wife's mother will move in here. He stood in the doorway, unflinching, as if discussing a change in weather. My spoon slipped, clattering against the pot's edge. The air carried Tessa's bright voice from the living room, her heels clicking against the wood floor as she spoke to Marjorie, her mother, in that sing-song tone of the untouchable. "This wall will come down," Tessa said. "It'll make the space so open." Marjorie's laugh followed, low and satisfied. "Yes, dear, and I'll finally have a proper room of my own." My palm pressed against the countertop to steady myself. This house wasn't just wood and paint. It was where Elijah and I had chosen to root our lives when Damon was small enough to ride on his father's shoulders. We'd spent nights repairing shingles, sanding floors, planting roses that still climbed the garden fence. 55 years of my heart lived in these walls, and now my only child stood ready to sweep them away. I looked at Damon, searching his eyes for hesitation, but found only resolve, the kind born of entitlement carefully nurtured. "I see," I said quietly, though every part of me trembled. He shifted, perhaps sensing my restraint, mistaking it for acceptance. "It's for the best, Mom. You'll be happier somewhere smaller, easier to manage." The words echoed as I stood in the room that had held birthday cakes, homework battles, family dinners. He turned away, leaving Tessa's laughter drifting through the hall. I wiped my hands on the apron Elijah had given me years ago, its fabric worn but still soft, and walked toward the dining room, where their voices grew louder. The faint scent of polish lingered on the oak table we'd bought secondhand when Damon was a toddler. I could still see his little fingers smearing jam across its surface, Elijah's gentle scolding, my laughter filling the air. Now Tessa had spread a glossy magazine on it, pages open to sterile modern interiors, white walls, steel fixtures, nothing like a home. Damon gestured broadly as if presenting a plan. "Mom, this house is in my name now. You'll be more comfortable somewhere smaller, less to clean, less to worry about." I nodded faintly, my eyes drifting to the sliding doors opening onto the back porch Elijah had built one summer, its boards laid with sweat and patience. His laughter had echoed through those long evenings as Damon toddled barefoot in the grass. Every plank carried his memory, and Damon's words felt like nails driven into them, stripping their meaning. Marjorie, with her styled hair and heavy pearls, leaned forward with a syrupy smile. "Don't worry, dear. I'll keep the place warm. It won't go unloved." Her eyes roamed the room, already claiming it, picturing her furniture where mine had stood for decades. I smoothed my apron, feeling my voice shrink among theirs. Each corner of the house whispered back, birthday candles blown out, Elijah kneeling in the garden, Damon's laughter ringing down the hall. Yet in their voices, those memories seemed erased. I excused myself, my steps carrying me to the quiet of my bedroom. Closing the door softly, I sat on the bed's edge, the weight of their words pressing against me. Their chatter drifted through the hallway, careless, as if I couldn't hear. Tessa's voice was clipped, efficient. "She needs a community of her own age. It's not healthy for her to rattle around here alone." Marjorie hummed agreement. "Yes, somewhere with activities, old friends, new friends, less strain." They painted me as fragile, too old, someone to be tucked away neatly. I looked around my bedroom, bedspread smoothed, drawers orderly, windows gleaming from my morning's work. Just hours earlier, I jogged 2 miles through the park, returned to teach a piano lesson to a neighbor's daughter. My mind balanced accounts, managed investments, recalled every detail of Elijah's handiwork. Fragile was the last thing I was, but I understood their game. It wasn't my health or comfort they cared about. It was square footage, location, the security they thought this house guaranteed. I thought of interrupting, standing in the doorway to declare my strength, but I was too tired to give them the satisfaction. Silence, I decided, was stronger. Sitting there, listening to my own breath above their plotting, I realized silence could be a shield, protecting me as I began to plan. When Damon knocked softly on my door a few minutes later, asking if I was all right, I rose to open it with a calm expression, already shaping the smile he expected. He stood there, his face softened by what he must have thought was concern, though it felt more like obligation. I assured him I was fine, my voice steady, and he nodded, relieved, before retreating back to the others. That evening, as the house settled into its familiar quiet, I lay in bed, the weight of the day pressing against me like an uninvited guest. Memories flooded in, unbidden, vivid as the day they were made. I could almost hear Elijah's voice in the hallway, calling out after a long day at work, his footsteps heavy but joyful as he scooped up young Damon for a hug. This bedroom, with its faded wallpaper we'd chosen together, had been our sanctuary. Nights spent whispering plans for the future, or simply holding each other through worries about bills and Damon's school. How had it come to this, where my son's eyes held no trace of that boy who'd once clung to us both? Entitlement had crept in slowly, I supposed, fed by years of indulgence, by Tessa's influence, by a world that prized convenience over connection. I turned toward the window, moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting shadows on the floorboards. Elijah had refinished himself, one rainy weekend. The next morning brought no relief, only a sharper clarity. I rose early as always, brewing coffee in the kitchen where sunlight slanted across the counters we'd installed after saving for months. Damon had already left for work, but Tessa lingered in the living room, flipping through more magazines, her voice carrying as she spoke on the phone to Marjorie about color schemes and furniture deliveries. Their entitlement wrapped around the house like vines, choking out the life I'd built. I poured my coffee, the steam rising in curls, and thought of how Elijah had always said family was the foundation, not the walls themselves. But these walls were our foundation, etched with his touch. Planting those roses in the garden, he'd knelt in the soil, dirt under his nails, grinning up at me as Damon toddled nearby, trying to help with a tiny shovel. "This'll be our legacy, Celine," he'd said, his voice warm with promise. Now, that legacy felt threatened, reduced to square footage for strangers who saw me as an obstacle. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness mirroring my thoughts, and decided then that protest would only fuel their narrative of me as difficult, outdated. Silence would be my ally, allowing me to observe, to gather strength without revealing my hand. As the day wore on, I busied myself with small tasks, dusting shelves lined with photo albums, their pages filled with snapshots of Damon's birthdays, Elijah's proud smiles at graduations, family vacations to the lake where we'd fished and laughed under endless skies. Each image stirred a quiet ache, but also a resolve. How dare they dismiss the woman who'd balanced budgets through lean years, nursed Elijah through his final illness, kept this home alive with love long after he was gone. Over lunch, Tessa breezed in, mentioning casually how they'd store my things, donate what wasn't needed, as if my life were clutter to be cleared. Marjorie arrived soon after, her pearls clinking as she inspected rooms with a possessive gaze, commenting on how the light in the master bedroom would suit her morning routines. I nodded politely, my silence a veil, but inside, anger simmered into determination. They mistook my quiet for frailty, but it was a choice. A shield forged from years of endurance. That afternoon, while they discussed knocking down walls, I slipped into the garden, fingers brushing the rose petals, their thorns, a reminder that beauty often came with defenses. Elijah had taught me that. Patience, resilience, the quiet power of waiting for the right moment. By evening, Damon returned, wearing the expression of a man delivering good news. He spoke slowly, gently, as though offering a favor. 2 weeks should be enough time, don't you think? That way we can help you get settled somewhere nice. I lifted my eyes to his, letting a calm smile settle. 2 weeks should be enough. My voice carried none of the memories pressing at my ribs, none of the betrayal twisting in my chest. He sighed with relief, as if my agreement confirmed his righteousness. Not long after, passing the living room, I heard Tessa and Marjorie murmuring with satisfaction. "We'll put her furniture in storage," Tessa said briskly. "She won't need it all. Maybe we'll donate some." Marjorie laughed softly. "Yes, and the guest room will finally be mine. I can make it feel like home." Their words floated after me down the hallway, but I didn't stop. I had no intention of giving them a single piece of myself. Not my furniture, not my silence, not even my outrage. Instead, I climbed the stairs, each step reinforcing my resolve. In my room, I sat at the desk, the wood smooth under my palms, and stared at the blank page of my journal. Words weren't needed yet, action would come soon enough. The house creaked softly around me, as if echoing my thoughts, its history a silent witness to the shift brewing within. That night, when the house had gone quiet, I opened an old leather address book, my fingers stopping at a name in Elijah's careful script: Richard Halberg, the attorney who'd guided him through every deal, every contract, every will. The decision felt right. A step toward reclaiming what was mine. As I dialed, the phone's ring cut through the stillness, and Richard's familiar voice answered after one tone. "Mrs. Calloway, it's been a long time." We spoke briefly, arranging a meeting, his tone steady as ever. Hanging up, I felt a spark of something new. Not vengeance, but clarity. The kind that comes from knowing your worth isn't defined by others' greed. The family's entitlement had blinded them, but my silence would unveil the truth. For now, I lay back, the ceiling above me patterned with shadows, and let the memories of Elijah's strength guide me forward. Tomorrow would bring answers, and with them, the first threads of a plan to weave my own future. The days blurred into a rhythm of feigned normalcy, each one laced with the undercurrent of their plans unfolding around me. I moved through the house like a shadow, tending to chores that had once brought comfort. Watering the roses in the garden, their petals unfurling in the morning light. Or polishing the silverware Elijah and I had received as a wedding gift, its tarnish yielding to my steady hands. Yet every action felt shadowed by the knowledge that soon these rituals might belong to someone else. Tessa and Marjorie visited more frequently now, their voices filling the spaces where silence used to reign. I'd catch snippets as I passed rooms, their words sharp as thorns, discussing how to modernize the kitchen, replace the counters Elijah had so carefully chosen. One afternoon, as I prepared tea in the kitchen, the scent of chamomile rising softly, I heard them in the adjacent sunroom, laughter punctuating their conversation, like punctuation in a script I wasn't meant to read. Marjorie's tone was indulgent, as if savoring a victory. It's better for her, really. Too fragile to manage on her own. Tessa agreed with a hum, her efficiency cutting through. A retirement complex would be perfect. Activities, friends her age, no more strain. Their dismissal hung in the air, reducing me to a fragile relic, someone whose life could be neatly boxed and relocated. I retreated to my bedroom earlier than usual that evening, the door clicking shut behind me, muffling but not silencing their voices that carried through the thin walls. Sitting on the edge of the bed, hands folded in my lap, I listened as they plotted without restraint, believing me out of earshot. Tessa's voice rose first, brisk as ever. She needs a community of her own age. It isn't healthy for her to rattle around here alone. Marjorie's agreement came with that low, satisfied hum. Yes, somewhere with activities, perhaps old friends, new friends, less strain. They spoke of me as if I were a problem to solve, not a woman who'd built this life brick by brick. Fragile, too old, that's what they wanted Damon to believe, painting me as someone to be tucked away, out of sight, while they claimed the home I'd tended for over half a century. The words stung, but they also ignited a quiet fire within me. I glanced at the mirror across the room, seeing not frailty, but the lines of experience, eyes sharp with the clarity of someone who'd navigated loss and emerged stronger. Just that morning I'd jogged 2 miles through the park, the path winding under oaks Elijah and I had walked countless times, my breath steady, legs carrying me with ease. Upon returning, I'd given a piano lesson to the neighbor's daughter, my fingers dancing across keys I'd tuned myself, recalling every note without hesitation. My mind remained as agile, balancing accounts that morning over coffee, managing investments that had grown steadily since Elijah's passing, even sketching repairs for a leaky faucet in the guest bath, tools I'd wielded alone for years. No, fragile was their illusion, a convenient story to justify their greed. As their voices continued, drifting like smoke, I realized the truth at the heart of it all. It wasn't concern driving them, but selfishness, a hunger for the square footage, the prime location, the steady hum of security this house provided. Marjorie's laugh punctuated another comment about redecorating my sewing nook into a home office, her pearls likely clinking as she gestured. Tessa chimed in about community events that would keep her occupied, as if my days were empty voids rather than filled with purpose. I could have burst in, voice raised in defense, laying bare my vitality, the volunteer work at the local library where I organized story hours, the the book club I'd hosted here for decades, discussions lively and minds engaged. But interrupting would only feed their narrative, turning me into the antagonist in their tale. Instead, I stayed seated, breath even, letting silence armor me. It was a shield, yes, but also a mirror, reflecting back their own flaws without a word from me. The conversation shifted to practicalities, how to handle my belongings, which pieces to keep for sentiment, which to discard as outdated. Tessa's efficiency shone through again, listing items like inventory. The old china can go, we'll replace it with something modern. Marjorie murmured approval, her satisfaction evident. I thought of the china in question, tucked in the cabinet downstairs, each plate bearing faint scratches from family meals, Elijah's favorites served on holidays with laughter echoing. To them, it was clutter. To me, it was history. Their words wove a web of entitlement, assuming I'd fade quietly into their prescribed future. But as I listened, a plan solidified in my mind, roots taking hold like the roses outside. Elijah had always said true strength lay in patience, in choosing the moment to act. I rose quietly, moving to the window where moonlight bathed the garden, the fence he'd mended still standing firm. Their voices faded as they moved to another room, but the echo remained, fueling my resolve. No longer would I be the fragile figure in their story. I'd author my own ending, one where their selfishness became the catalyst for my freedom. By the time sleep came, fitful and laced with dreams of Elijah's steady presence, I knew action was imminent. The next day dawned crisp, sunlight filtering through the curtains I'd sewn myself, patterns faded but enduring. I dressed methodically, choosing a blouse Elijah had once complimented, its color bringing out my eyes, a small affirmation of the woman I remained. Downstairs, the house felt charged, every creak a reminder of its loyalty to me. Damon called mid-morning, his voice tentative, checking in as if to gauge my acceptance. I reassured him calmly, my words measured, hiding the storm within. After hanging up, I stepped into the garden, kneeling to weed around the roses, soil cool under my fingers. A neighbor waved from across the fence, commenting on my energy, and I smiled genuinely, vitality pulsing through me. Their dismissals had only sharpened my focus, turning hurt into purpose. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And soon they'd learn the cost of underestimating it. With that resolve anchoring me, I carried on through the following days, my outward calm a carefully maintained facade that masked the gathering storm within. The meeting with Richard was set for the next afternoon, but until then, I filled my hours with the quiet routines that had always grounded me. Baking bread in the oven, Elijah had repaired more times than I could count, its warmth filling the kitchen with a scent that evoked Sundays long past, or tending to the mail, sorting bills with the precision that had kept our finances afloat through uncertain years. Damon noticed my composure during our brief interactions, his glances carrying a mix of relief and perhaps a flicker of guilt, though he never voiced it. One evening as the sun dipped low, casting golden hues across the living room where family portraits still hung, he approached me again. His tone measured, as if rehearsing lines. He reiterated the timeline, framing it as kindness. "We've thought it through, Mom. 2 weeks gives us time to help you transition smoothly." I met his eyes, my smile serene, betraying none of the calculations turning in my mind. The attorney's number already dialed, the address book tucked away like a secret weapon. "Yes, 2 weeks will do," I replied evenly, my voice a gentle echo that hid the iron beneath. He exhaled, shoulders relaxing, mistaking my agreement for finality, for the end of any potential resistance. As he walked away, joining Tessa in the den where they pored over renovation sketches, I lingered in the hallway, the wallpaper's familiar pattern under my fingertips, a reminder of choices Elijah and I had made together. Debating colors late into the night. Their voices soon rose again, unguarded, drifting to me like unintended confessions. Tessa's brisk efficiency dominated, outlining plans for my possessions as if they were mere inventory. Her old dresser can go into storage, it's too bulky for the new layout. And those quilts? Donate them if she doesn't want them. Marjorie's soft laugh followed, indulgent and proprietary. The china cabinet will make way for my armoire. It'll fit perfectly in the alcove. I stood motionless, absorbing their words, each one a confirmation of their entitlement, their assumption that my life could be dismantled and reassembled to suit them. Yet internally, my planning accelerated, thoughts racing toward the attorney's office, where clarity awaited. I imagined Richard's steady voice unraveling the threads they'd woven, revealing the control I still held. Silence cloaked me as I slipped upstairs, but my mind was alive with strategy, mapping out steps like Elijah once planned our garden beds, patient and precise. The next morning, before leaving for the appointment, I prepared breakfast as usual. The eggs sizzling in the pan, Elijah had seasoned over years of use, their aroma a small act of defiance in a house shifting underfoot. Tessa breezed through, grabbing a piece of toast, mentioning offhand how they'd repurpose the pantry for extra storage once I was gone. I nodded politely, my response minimal, fueling their illusion of my acquiescence. Driving across town, the familiar streets blurred into a backdrop for reflection. The park where I'd jogged, the library where I'd volunteered, all testaments to a life far from fragile. Richard's office was as I remembered, shelves lined with legal volumes, their spines a testament to order amid chaos. He adjusted his glasses, tapping the file before him. "Celine, your husband was a cautious man. He placed everything, the insurance, the company shares, the investments, in your name. The house was transferred to Damon for tax purposes. But make no mistake, the control remains yours." His words washed over me like a balm, not sparking anger but a profound clarity, warming me from within. I left with a new stillness, one that followed me home as I sat in the driveway, gazing at the house I'd once feared losing, now seeing it as a chapter ready to close on my terms. Back inside, the family remained oblivious, Damon asking over dinner if I'd toured any retirement spots yet, his concern feigned but polite. I smiled softly, replying that I was still looking, while Tessa chimed in about water aerobics classes, her tone light, as if envisioning me there was amusing. Marjorie chuckled, picturing it, her pearls catching the light. I excused myself early, their laughter trailing me, but I held fast to my silence, a gift they didn't deserve to unwrap. Upstairs, I reviewed notes from Richard, the documents outlining assets Elijah had safeguarded, each line a thread of his foresight. Internally, plans bloomed, contacting a realtor next, assessing the house's value quietly, turning their timeline against them. The evening deepened, and as I lay in bed, the house's creaks seemed complicit, whispering encouragement. Their overheard schemes about my belongings had only strengthened my hand, transforming whispers of doubt into a blueprint for action. No longer tethered by their narrative, I envisioned a future unbound, where agreement was merely a stepping stone to reclamation. Days later, as preparations simmered in secret, I overheard more fragments, Tessa discussing paint samples for what had been my study, Marjorie claiming the sun porch for her reading nook. Each revelation fueled my internal resolve, a quiet tally of their overreach. I agreed to small things outwardly, like sorting a few boxes, but withheld the truth, letting them build their castle on sand. The calm I projected was no longer just a shield. It had become a weapon, owned by years of understated strength. Elijah's memory guided me, his patient ways reminding me that true power often lay in the unspoken. Soon, the realtor would arrive, and the gears would turn irreversibly. For now, I savored the irony, their plans unfolding while mine took root in the shadows. The clarity from Richard's words lingered like a quiet dawn, illuminating paths I'd thought dimmed by time and loss. Sitting in the driveway that afternoon, the engine ticking as it cooled, I stared at the house through the windshield, its familiar outline no longer a cage but a canvas for change. The roses climbed the fence as always, their blooms defiant in the late sun, much like the resolve blooming within me. Elijah had been cautious, yes, placing assets in my name with a foresight that now felt like a final gift, wrapped in legal bindings they couldn't unravel. The house might bear Damon's name on paper, but the power to decide its fate rested with me, a truth that shifted everything. No longer did I see myself as the displaced widow, fragile and fading. Instead, I felt the steady warmth of agency, a fire kindled from embers I'd nearly forgotten. As I stepped inside, the door's familiar creak greeted me like an old friend, and for the first time since Damon's announcement, the weight on my shoulders eased, replaced by a sense of possibility. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the garden, I wandered the rooms with fresh eyes, touching surfaces Elijah had crafted, the banister he'd smoothed until it gleamed, The mantel, where we'd displayed Damon's school awards, now gathering dust amid their indifference. Contemplating the house's future, I envisioned not loss but transformation, a shedding of burdens that had anchored me too long. Damon thought he held the reins, Tessa and Marjorie already mentally rearranging furniture, but their assumptions were built on sand. I paused in the study, where Elijah's desk still stood, drawers filled with old ledgers that chronicled our shared thrift and triumphs. Pulling one out, I traced his handwriting, neat columns of figures that had secured our stability through storms. His caution wasn't fear, it was love, ensuring I'd never be left vulnerable. Empowered by this legacy, my mind raced ahead. Selling the property, perhaps, turning equity into freedom, leaving behind the echoes of betrayal for horizons untried. The thought brought a subtle smile. Their entitlement had handed me the key to unlock chains I'd worn unknowingly. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting patterns on the floor Elijah had laid tile by tile during a sweltering summer. I brewed coffee, the aroma grounding me as I pondered next steps, the house's future crystallizing in my thoughts. It wasn't just about reclaiming control, it was about honoring Elijah's vision, stepping beyond the roles of mother and caretaker into something wholly mine. Damon left early for work, his goodbye brief, oblivious to the shift in me. Tessa hummed in the background, sorting swatches for curtains she planned to hang in my absence. I nodded at her chatter, my empowerment a secret veil, allowing me to observe without engagement. Later, alone in the garden, I knelt among the roses, pruning thorns with deliberate snips, each cut mirroring the pruning of doubts from my mind. The soil yielded to my fingers, rich with years of nurturing, and I recalled Elijah's words during a similar task. Life's about growth, Celine, even when it means letting go. His insight resonated now, empowering me to contemplate release, not as defeat, but as rebirth. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a chapter closing, its sail a bridge to uncharted joys. By midday, that contemplation solidified into action. I picked up the phone again, this time dialing Lena Ortiz, the realtor whose flyer had caught my eye last spring, tucked away in a drawer like a forgotten promise. Her voice answered briskly, confident, the kind that closed deals before stepping foot inside. We spoke briefly, arranging her visit, and as I hung up, a surge of empowerment coursed through me, contemplating how the house's value, location, structure, memories woven into walls would fund a future they couldn't touch. 2 days later, Lena arrived, her sharp heels clicking across the porch Elijah had built, echoing like the ticking of a clock I'd set in motion. I led her through each room, my expression neutral as her eyes widened at the potential. "Celine," she said, pausing in the dining room, "this property is worth far more than most would guess. Location alone makes it gold, but the structure will spark a bidding war easily." Her certainty steadied me further, and I could almost see Elijah leaning in the doorway, nodding approval, his presence a silent affirmation of my path. We walked the garden, sun warming the roses, and for a moment, pride swelled over wounds, the house's future no longer a threat, but a launch pad. Meanwhile, Damon remained comfortably ignorant, assuming my quiet drives were to scout retirement communities, places with manicured lawns and scheduled activities that fit their image of me. One evening over dinner, the table set with simple fare I'd prepared. Roast vegetables from the garden, bread still warm. He asked casually if I'd found any spots with good programs. I smiled softly, replying that I was still searching, my words light while my mind held the truth of Lena's appraisal. Tessa added a comment about water aerobics, her tone playful, and Marjorie chuckled as if the idea were a shared jest, picturing me in a swimsuit amid strangers. I excused myself soon after, their amusement trailing me. But it no longer pierced. Empowerment had armored me, and contemplating the house's impending sale filled me with quiet anticipation. Upstairs, I reviewed Lena's notes, the figures promising more than enough to reshape my life, the future unfolding like a map Elijah might have drawn. Deliberately. Each step veiled in the secrecy that had become my closest companion. The following days unfolded in layers of discretion. Morning jogs that doubled as moments of reflection, the path through the park winding like the twists in my plan, or afternoons spent in the garden, weeding with a focus that masked my internal calculations. Engaging Lena fully now, we went room by room, her notepad filling with notes on small repairs and staging adjustments. A fresh coat of paint in the hallway where scuffs from Damon's childhood games still faintly showed, new curtains in the living room to brighten spaces they'd soon learn weren't theirs. She promised her team would handle it quietly, swiftly, slipping in during hours when the family was absent, tools muffled, changes subtle enough to evade notice. I signed the preliminary papers with a steady hand, each stroke releasing a fragment of the burden I'd carried, the ink drying like a seal on my independence. By the time she left, briefcase full and smile sharp, I knew the clock had started ticking, irreversible and silent. Damon and the others carried on with their illusions, speaking of renovations as if time stretched endlessly before them. Over breakfast one morning, the kitchen filled with the scent of fresh coffee and toast from bread I'd baked. Damon mentioned contractors he'd contacted for the wall demolition, his tone casual, assuming my compliance. I nodded, murmuring agreement while sipping my mug, the warmth grounding me as I misled him about my recent outings. Visits to potential communities, I said vaguely, places with gardens and classes that mirrored their vision of my future. Tessa perked up, suggesting one she'd researched online, complete with bridge clubs and shuttle services, her efficiency masking the dismissal. Marjorie nodded along, her pearls shifting as she helped herself to jam, commenting on how freeing it would be for me to downsize. Their words washed over me, no longer stinging but fueling the secrecy of the sale, each deception a brick in the wall I built around my plans. Internally, I pictured the bidding war Lena had predicted, offers pouring in for the location alone, the quiet neighborhood, proximity to parks. Elijah and I had chosen for its peace, now a commodity I'd turn to my advantage. As preparations advanced discreetly, I took quiet joy in the irony, misleading them with half-truths that fit their narrative. One afternoon, while Lena's painter touched up the dining room trim, the scent of fresh latex faint but fresh, I drove to a nearby cafe, ostensibly to browse retirement brochures, but really to review listing details on my phone, the screen glowing with descriptions that highlighted the home's charm without revealing my intent. Returning, I found Tessa measuring windows for blinds, her tape measure snapping back with authority, discussing how the new fabrics would block the afternoon sun that had always warmed Elijah's favorite chair. I offered a mild suggestion, keeping my voice light, all while knowing those windows would soon frame views for strangers. The discreet preparations continued, a plumber fixing a minor leak in the guest bath, one Elijah had patched years ago, now professionally sealed without fanfare. Lena coordinated it all via hushed calls, her confidence a steady anchor as we appraised not just monetary worth, but the emotional release it promised. The house, with its appraised gold status, felt less like a loss and more like a vessel I'd outgrown, its sale a secret key to doors long closed. Evenings brought more opportunities to mislead, the family gathering around the table where I'd set simple meals, stews simmered with herbs from the garden, flavors evoking memories they ignored. Damon asked about my searches, his concern superficial, and I replied with fabricated details about a complex with walking trails, mirroring the park paths I truly cherished. Tessa added enthusiasm for yoga classes there, imagining me among peers, while Marjorie chuckled about the ease of maintenance-free living. Their assumptions blinded them, allowing my plans to flourish in the shadows. Meanwhile, the house transformed subtly under Lena's guidance. Furniture rearranged slightly for photos, closets decluttered of items I'd quietly packed away, each action a step toward the discreet sale. I appraised my own progress too, feeling the empowerment from Richard's revelations deepen. The future no longer a vague horizon, but a tangible path, funded by assets they'd underestimated. Elijah's caution had paved this way. His legacy, not in bricks, but in the freedom to choose. As the week progressed, Lena returned for final walkthroughs, her heels softened by rugs Elijah had chosen, discussing marketing strategies that would draw buyers swiftly, discreetly. We stood in the backyard, the fence he'd mended framing us, and she outlined timelines that aligned perfectly with their 2-week delusion. Misleading the family grew easier, my outings explained as errands for packing supplies, while in truth, I met Lena at neutral spots to approve digital listings, the house's photos capturing its essence without sentiment. One night, after they'd retired, I sat in the study, lamplight casting glows on walls soon to change hands, and felt gratitude amid the secrecy. The sale not revenge, but reclamation, a discreet unraveling of their web. The plans solidified, each detail a thread pulling me forward, away from their grasp. That night, after Lena's final walkthrough faded into the evening's hush, I sat at my desk with the curtains drawn, the lamplight casting a soft glow over surfaces I'd soon leave behind. Pulling out the old wooden box Elijah had kept beneath our bed, its hinges creaking faintly like a whispered secret, I sifted through scraps of our shared dreams. Travel brochures, yellowed at the edges, postcards from places we'd only imagined, a folded map of Morocco, with routes traced in his careful hand. My fingertip followed the faded ink, memories surfacing like waves. Nights in our 30s, too entangled in Damon's schooling and Elijah's long hours to chase adventures, yet we dreamed aloud. One evening in the garden hammock, stars pinpricking the sky, he'd pointed upward and said, "One day, Celine, we'll drink mint tea under desert skies. You'll wear those bright scarves you love, and I'll read to you until the lamps go out." I'd laughed, replying, "Maybe," as bills and work crowded in, the dream settling into dust, until now. Reviving it felt like breathing life into embers, the box a portal to possibilities funded by the sale Lena orchestrated. On my laptop, the screen illuminated with images of riads, painted doors, courtyards with fountains, blue-tiled walls opening to ocean views. I clicked through listings in Casablanca, Tangier, Marrakesh, prices once absurd now within reach, thanks to Elijah's assets and the house's impending windfall. One property caught my breath, a sprawling estate near Essaouira. White arches framing the sea, a courtyard where olive trees grew in stone planters, the air imagined thick with salt and spice. The price, substantial but feasible, made my shoulders relax rather than tense. This was no fantasy. It was a revival, Elijah's words waiting all these years, tucked in that box with the map, his voice steady and sure. One day, he'd promised, and for the first time, I grasped that the day had arrived, betrayal's sting alchemized into opportunity. I bookmarked the listing, my heart quickening at the thought of arches and fountains replacing these familiar walls, a new chapter scripted in vibrant hues. The research consumed me, hours slipping by as I read descriptions of bustling markets, windswept beaches, the call to prayer echoing over rooftops, elements Elijah and I had romanticized in quiet moments. Reviving the dream wasn't escape, it was fulfillment, a tribute to the life we'd built and the one we'd deferred. Closing the laptop, I folded the map into my bag, knowing I'd need it sooner than the family could fathom, its promise unbroken amid their unraveling plans. The next morning, with the dream vivid in my mind, I decided to cook one more dinner, the kind I hadn't prepared in years, a quiet ritual to mark the end. The kitchen filled with aromas as I roasted chicken with rosemary plucked from the garden, its earthy scent mingling with potatoes crisping in the oven, bread baked fresh so the crust crackled under the knife. The table gleamed with the good china, second-hand pieces Elijah and I had polished until they shone. Each plate a canvas for memories of holidays and laughter. Damon arrived first, slipping into his seat with a smile of relief, as if my recent calmness had erased his doubts. Tessa followed, chattering about paint swatches from the hardware store, laying them on the table like part of the meal. "This one would brighten the living room," she said, sliding a pale gray square toward Damon. "With the new furniture, it'll feel completely fresh." Marjorie helped herself to wine before I offered, her gaze sweeping the room with proprietary ease. "I'll take the master bedroom," she said absently. "The light in the mornings is perfect." I felt Damon glance my way, but I kept my smile easy, pouring more wine into his glass before my own. My composure wrapped the table in an ease they mistook for surrender. While inside, I pictured the sealed envelopes in my drawer, letters to Lena confirming details, to Richard with thanks, and one to myself, folded around Elijah's map. They ate heartily, forks clinking against plates, talking over one another about curtains, flooring, how space would open once clutter was cleared. I nodded occasionally, even laughed at Damon's joke about mismatched decor, all while the dream revival played in my thoughts. The Moroccan estate's terraces overlooking dunes, fountains murmuring like forgotten lullabies. The meal stretched into dessert, a simple tart brushed with honey from the local market, its sweetness contrasting the bitterness I'd swallowed these weeks. They leaned back, satisfied, certainty etched in their faces that the house was theirs. I gathered plates quietly, stacking them in the sink, back turned to their laughter. The apron around my waist a final tie to this chapter. As the evening wound down, I dried my hands, feeling only the weight of tomorrow, the dream now a beacon pulling me forward. Upstairs later, I reviewed the estate's photos again, arches and olive trees calling, the research solidifying my path. The family's composure during dinner, oblivious to the shift, only heightened the irony, their plans crumbling as mine rose, a revival born from ashes they'd unwittingly scattered. The following day brought final touches, the house staged subtly, my bag with the map a constant companion. The dinner's memory lingered, my composure a mask that had served its purpose, allowing the dream to flourish unchecked. Elijah's voice echoed in my revival, guiding me toward horizons we'd whispered of, now within grasp. The morning of the move arrived quietly. The house hushed in pale light filtering through windows I'd washed countless times, their glass now reflecting a world on the cusp of change. I stood in the dining room, running a cloth over the oak table one last time, its surface gleaming, wood darkened with age, every scratch a testament to life lived, jam-smeared fingers, candle wax from birthdays, Elijah's hand resting there during quiet talks. On it I placed 2 envelopes, each in my careful hand, one for Damon, the other for Tessa. Written late into the night, they held no bitterness, just truth. The house sold, papers signed, deal closed, the deed he thought secured now meaningless. Tessa's was shorter, clarifying their imagined plans were illusions from the start. I glanced toward the hallway, suitcases stacked neatly, containing only essentials. Journals filled with Elijah's quotes and my reflections. A few heirlooms like the silver locket he'd given me on our anniversary, the wedding quilt my mother had sewn with stitches of love, and his photo in its worn frame, smile eternal. Everything else I left, not as gifts but empty shells, husks of what they'd coveted without understanding. Pausing at the threshold, I listened to the stillness, feeling the weight lift, replaced by freedom I hadn't carried in years, a lightness like dawn breaking. I touched the table's edge once more, then picked up my bags, the door closing softly behind me. The taxi waited at the curb, engine humming, trunk open for my luggage. I slid inside, the leather seat cool against my palms, and gave the driver the airport address, my voice steady, map folded in my bag, a talisman of promise. As the house receded in the rearview mirror, shrinking to a point, I thought of the letters waiting discovery, the shock that would ripple through them like a stone in still water. By the time the taxi reached the airport, I envisioned it unfolding. Damon noticing the envelopes first, frowning as he tore one open, Tessa leaning over, impatience turning to disbelief. His voice might break. She sold it? This can't be. While Tessa's retort sharpened, anger masking fear. You let this happen? It was supposed to be settled. Marjorie would deny it, pearls trembling, insisting on a mistake, that people like them didn't face such upheavals. But it was real, their calls beginning almost immediately, my phone buzzing in my bag as I stood at the ticket counter, the agent handing me a boarding pass with a polite smile. Damon's name lit the screen, then Tessa's, then his again, vibrations muffled by leather as I slipped it deeper, out of reach. By the time they grasped no answer came, the house was no longer theirs. Nor the permanence they'd mistaken for entitlement. I walked through security with my essentials, Elijah's photo pressed between journal pages like a bookmark in my story, the boarding gate opening ahead, beyond it a plane to carry me toward horizons we'd dreamed. The flight stretched long, but I barely noticed, thoughts steady, heart lighter than in years, clouds parting below like veils lifting. Upon landing, a chauffeur in a dark suit held a placard with my name, greeting me warmly, guiding through air scented with salt and spice, a prelude to the new. We drove palm-lined boulevards, the city unfolding in vibrant colors, market stalls bursting with wares, whitewashed walls catching sun, glimpses of sea sparkling like invitations. Beyond the bustle, the estate appeared, wrought iron gates swinging open to courtyards laced with fountains, mosaic tiles shimmering, arches rising like fulfilled promises. The car slowed before the mansion, unlike anything I'd known. Air cool with jasmine, every corner artistry, intricate patterns, carved doors, rooms opening to gardens alive with olive trees swaying gently. I settled onto a terrace as dusk fell, the desert stretching distant, sky deepening to violet, a servant bringing mint tea, steam curling upward in delicate spirals. Wrapping hands around the cup, its warmth grounded me in this beginning, the sea's murmur a soft accompaniment. My phone buzzed again. Damon's name flashing, messages pleading, "Mom, please call. We didn't mean it. Just come back, we'll fix this." I pressed delete, the silence afterward peace profound and earned. For 55 years I'd given everything, time, love, sacrifice, only to be deemed disposable, yet their betrayal led here, to freedom I'd claimed at last. They told me to find my own place. I did. As the stars emerged over the terrace, their light soft and scattered like forgotten wishes, I let the evening unfold gently, the mint tea cooling in my cup, while the fountain's trickle whispered through the courtyard. The estate wrapped around me, its arches framing a sky vast and unhurried, olive leaves rustling in a breeze that carried hints of distant sands. Memories of the old house lingered, not as anchors but as faded echoes. Elijah's laughter in the garden, Damon's childhood steps on wooden floors, now softened by distance, like pages in a book I'd closed with care. Here in this new world of mosaic and jasmine, I felt the pace of life slow, each breath deeper, freer, as if the years of holding steady had finally released their grip. The servant returned with a light shawl, draping it over my shoulders against the cooling air, and I nodded thanks, my voice a murmur blending with the night's quiet song. No more frantic calls pierced the calm, I'd silenced them, choosing instead the serenity of waves lapping far below, the promise of tomorrow's sun rising over unfamiliar horizons. Elijah's map unfolded beside me, traced paths we dreamed now real under my fingertips, guiding not just travel but a heart mended in unexpected ways. Betrayal had been a harsh teacher, but in its wake came this gift. A life reclaimed, simple joys awaiting in market strolls, tea under stars, solitude that felt like companionship with the past. As the violet sky deepened to indigo, I leaned back, the world hushed, and whispered to the night, "We made it, my love," the words dissolving into peace, a gentle end to beginnings anew.